And thanks for sticking around. Imagine waking up one morning and finding out your student loan debt has been wiped clean. Well, that dream could soon be a reality for tens of thousands of former college students. Their private student loans may be forgiven, all because of a paperwork snafu. At least $5 billion worth of private student loans are in dispute here. Creditors have brought more than 800 lawsuits this year alone against borrowers. But it's up to these lenders to prove ownership of the defaulted loans. And because of missing paperwork, borrowers are essentially now off the hook. Joining me now is Forbes contributor and founder and CEO of the online personal finance company Make Lemonade, Zack Friedman. Zack, so if they're going after those who haven't paid, they have to prove that these borrowers are the borrowers and that they own the debt. Why is it all being erased then?
Right, that's a great question. So, as you mentioned, the student collection is in several state and local courts. They have to prove, National Collegiate, which is one of the largest owners of student loans in the country, has to prove chain of title and ownership. They didn't originate these loans. They were purchased through a transaction known as a securitization. They purchased it from banks that issued the loans about 10 years ago before the financial crisis. Credit standards were looser at the time, and now they've defaulted. And National Collegiate has the onus to prove ownership and chain of title. Problem is, they may have lost the documents.
If they just leave it alone and don't go after them until they find the documents, is that okay? Is the debt still there then?
The debt is still there, and it'll be up to judges to decide who in fact owns those loans. It would be fraudulent for a debt collector to claim ownership of loans and try to collect on them when they in fact don't own them. So it'll be an interesting development to see how judges decide.
Okay, so this comes to light because we're seeing more loans defaulting from former students, which is the bigger problem, right? The piece of the big enchilada here.
Mm-hmm. That's right. We have about a $1.4 trillion student loan crisis in this country.
So this is a drop in the bucket.
$5 billion is a fraction. It's a high headline number, but it is a large amount. We have about $1.4 trillion outstanding of student loans in aggregate, both from federal and private loans. 44 million borrowers in the U.S., and student loan debt is now the second highest consumer debt category.
Well, just doing our simple math there on that screen, if you have an 11% default rate, right? About 10%.
Sure.
You've got $130 billion at risk here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty substantial. And the rates have come down since the financial crisis. They used to be north of 20%. They're now about 10 or 11%. But it is a massive issue. And, you know, we've seen student loans are right behind mortgages now.
When does this turn a corner?
It's a great question. It really depends on the developments that come out of Washington. You know, student loan borrowers have different options they can take with the federal government and private student loan refinancing options, for example. But it'll really be up to Washington to make better policy to help student loan borrowers with some relief.
All right. Zack Friedman, thank you so much. I appreciate your perspective. And it's something we'll be watching because it affects so many young people across the country. Zack Friedman, thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
All right, that does